Earlier this week, Microsoft invited me to attend Microsoft Build in Seattle, and I had a chance to sit down with Ryan Cunningham, a CVP on the Power Platform, to talk about the rise of vibe coding, agents, and the importance of human control in the AI. I hope you enjoy this conversation, and let's get into it.
This is a comfortable chair. This is very deep.
Yeah.
Kick me if I nod off.
I might do that first. Hello, everyone. We're at Microsoft Build. I'm here with Ryan Cunningham, who's the CVP of Power Platform Intelligent Apps. Did I get that right?
You got it.
Okay.
You're trying to pack in as many syllables as possible.
Amazing. So Ryan, just in case someone isn't familiar with the Power Platform, do you mind explaining what it is and who benefits from it usually?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Power Platform is, for technical people out there, is basically a layer on top of all of our great developer tools and cloud platform in Azure. But it's built for teams to go much faster and build much more software just at that higher level of abstraction. And it's got a bunch of specific tools inside it. Power Apps is a classic one that a lot of people know and love for building web and mobile applications. Power Automate for workflow automation. And recently one that has been getting a lot of attention is Copilot Studio for building agents on top of all the great tools in Microsoft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. So I'm imagining Power Platform's been used like millions of times at this point, and I'm curious to hear from you, like you as a product leader. Traditionally we approach things as we know a problem and we go solve it with traditional computing.
Yep.
So in terms of the AI landscape, how do you work backwards from, defining the right problems to solve with AI?
Yeah.
How do you make sure you're building a painkiller for users, not a vitamin? How do you approach it?
Yeah, this is a really interesting space of innovation right now, actually, and I think a lot of developer tools of the past, whether they were low code or high code, really kind of assumed the developer already knew what they wanted and needed to build, and really just became a high productivity environment for creating that thing. And in an AI world, sometimes we need to question those assumptions a little bit. And one of the things that we've just brought to general availability here at the Build event is called plans in Power Apps, and they do exactly what you're talking about. They don't start at the solution; they start at what's the problem in the first place. What are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to make better? And they actually have a team of software development agents built into that experience that help you think through the whole problem. They think through who are the users and what stories and requirements do they have? What is the type of processes that are implied by those users and stories? What data model do we need to create? What solution architecture should we contemplate? So they really do what a higher order software team would do before they start writing code. And that is really helpful for setting people off down the right path.
I guess in terms of, let's say on the implementation stage, once you have the technical person, they know what they want to build, and obviously we're seeing a rise in vibe coding or AI generated code. I've seen people kind of going back and forth about it online in terms of how good it is, how much you should rely on it, and kind of like when do you kind of put in your expertise. So I guess from your experience so far, when's a good time to vibe code versus when's a good time to do like the old-fashioned hands-on coding?
Well, look, developers of all kinds in all tools for many generations have been experimenting and trying things out and seeing what works and then taking that and hardening it and getting it ready to go to much wider production. And so in many ways, this is actually not a new trend at all. What is cool now is that cycle of trying something out is just much, much faster than it used to be, because I can pair program with an agent who will do a lot of that code writing for me. And that's where I think the magical part of that feeling of, wow, I had an idea and expressed it, and now I can see it and touch it. That's so cool. That's a magical feeling that people have felt from Power Platform for many years, that people have felt from Visual Studio before it. And I think a new sort of round of that is happening right now. And I think that's a really important part of the creative process. We also have customers who need to run mission critical services that their organizations absolutely depend on that cannot fail. And I think for that, you need to sort of go from that early exploration phase to what does it take to actually go ship high scale production software. And one of the cool things about Power Platform and Copilot Studio is you kind of get the best of both worlds. You can build on top of a very robust platform. I mean, to your point, more than 50 million people use the Power Platform, every month. Customers do it for some very critical use cases. It's a very robust, mature, scalable, secure platform for the enterprise. But now I can, within that context, experiment and try things and iterate at just a whole new pace and speed. And that means that I can go fast, but also not break things. And that's a huge benefit to our customers.
You mentioned something about the feeling that people have when they're using the new capabilities. And, Power Platform, very mature platform that people have been using. So they have a certain expectation around the trust and the control they have over things. And we always talk about model capabilities, becoming better. But at the interface level, have you learned anything or implemented any new patterns that kind of maintain that sense of trust and control that people have at the surface level, not at the model level?
Oh, absolutely. At every level, both for developers and people making things in Power Platform, for end users interacting with them, and really importantly for admins and security professionals who oversee and manage the platform. It's really important to us that in all of those places, people can sort of see behind the curtain a little bit, have transparency into what they're getting and why, and have the ability to set guardrails and controls. And that is a really important reason why Power Platform is so widely adopted, especially inside of the enterprise, is because there are great tools for managing security, managing governance, managing operations and lifecycle management, managing high availability and disaster recovery. Those are all offered as managed services in Power Platform. And they show up for admins, they show up for developers in the maker experience. Increasingly, they actually show up for end users too, especially when they're working with AI.
I guess even on the, from your experiments so far and building the product and integrating the new features, the most common pattern, interaction pattern we've seen is, the chat-based UI, ChatGPT, Copilot. And I noticed, for example, the plan designer had more of a canvas feel. So do you see any new patterns that are more effective than a conversational interface?
Yeah, look, conversational interfaces are a very important part of how software is evolving, but they're just a part of it. And, if you think about agents and what they can really do, what separates an agent from a chatbot in part is that it doesn't just sit in the corner and wait for somebody to ask it a question and then go and look up information and answer the question. It has tools, it can act, and it doesn't even need to wait to be prompted to act. It can sort of leap into action on your behalf, like you would expect from any coworker. And, that's something we've taken to heart in sort of how we design some of these new AI-first experiences. The chat pane was really useful to just add onto the side of existing software. But something like plans and Power Apps, we have recreated from scratch in a world of AI and agents. And so we've gotten to think about, when do you want to ask a question and talk to an agent? When should the agent just pick up and do work on your behalf and bring it to you for feedback and input? And how do we, just create a much richer full screen experience rather than only relegating it to a chat pane on the side? So chat is very important, and you'll see a lot of it show up throughout the platform, but there are a lot of exciting ways where you really just feel like you're live co-authoring with these agents. That takes it way beyond, a simple chatbot.
So you just mentioned agents.
Yeah.
Again, it feels like the word of the year, along with vibe coding. And again, it's when you follow the conversation online, you see a lot of competing opinions about, what's an agent good for, what's it not good for. So from what you've seen so far, can you give me what's the current state of agents? What are they good at today? What are they maybe still bad at? And maybe the trajectory you see over the next few years.
I think the trajectory is the important part, because anybody who's judging an entire sort of new chapter in technology based on one thing they saw yesterday is looking at a far too narrow piece of the puzzle, right? And if you zoom out and you look at how far we've come just in the last 6 to 12 months and how fast we're going, I think I, for one, and this company are definitely not betting against agents. We're betting on that as a really impactful part of how work happens inside of a company. And so the key is not so much what can they or can't they do today. It's how do you go create an environment where they get better all the time. And that's really what we're doing with Power Platform, with Copilot Studio, with Plans, with Power Apps. Is how do you create that interface between humans and agents that becomes really productive and then improves constantly. And that's, I think, a really important thing for developers to wrap their head around. A classic business software implementation usually had a start date and an end date. You deployed the software and it was done. An agent is not done. In fact, the day you deploy it is probably the least capable it ever will be. And you invest in updating prompts, fine-tuning models, adding additional knowledge sources, giving it better tools. The models themselves that it runs on continue to upgrade and improve, and you invest in those agents and they become, much better, much faster. And so really the capability of an agent is a function of how much you put into it, and how quickly the underlying tech is evolving, and both of those things are moving incredibly fast.
Okay. I guess, continuing on the topic of agents, going back to the emotional aspect of using tools, one of the things that people worry about with agents is the losing control. I think we have this attachment to just being in control in general over all aspects of our lives. So I think one of the reasons that holds people back is the risk of maybe relying on an agent and then kind of the consequences being your responsibility or your accountability. So let's say, based on the current state of agents today, how would you, if you wanted to implement one, how would you assess the risk or try to mitigate it as much as possible? So you can still, leverage the technology as it is today, but stay grounded in in reality.
Yeah, and look, this is such an important balance to get right. Because I think for organizations that just rush in headfirst with zero concern about accuracy and risk, there is a lot of risk to doing this wrong. At the same time, organizations that are far too risk averse and sort of wait for technology to get perfect will find that there are other organizations in their categories that are moving much faster. And so the risk of standing still is just as high as the risk of moving too fast. And so you got to hit that sweet spot. And that, again, is exactly why we're building really robust platforms around this tech, where if I'm building an agent in Copilot Studio, I'm not just rolling the dice. I'm building in the context of my organization's security boundary. I'm building in a place where developers are always acting as themselves, where I have a well-governed implementation, where I have sharing limits applied and data policies, where I have all the great, defensive measures of the Microsoft security stack just sort of natively running there on my behalf. And yet I can experiment and I can try things out and I can, tune prompts and make them better and then get a sense of how an agent is going to behave before I deploy it more widely. And I think that's the kind of instinct we've had at every major technology platform shift. Every single time we've added an abstraction layer for developers over the last 40 years. There have been people who have fretted and worried about, will we lose the knowledge of low-level assembly programming languages? Will we be able to build better software without deeply understanding, those granular things? And yet at every turn, we have invited way more people in. We have created way more technology that's done more good in the world, and we've created more abundance as a result. And so, this is really a moment to take that to the next level.
Speaking about technologies that, are improving the world, have you seen any interesting use cases so far that some of your customers have used with Power Platform? Is there something that really shocked you in a good way?
Oh man, there are so many cool things happening with Power Platform in general, and especially with Power Platform and agents. Customers are really starting to change a lot of parts of their operations that are just fundamentally inefficient, slow, and really impact the quality of service that they can provide to their customers. Some of that is the kind of invisible stuff we don't often see as end consumers. We've got this great customer, Dow, big multinational company that previously had an incredibly manual process for how they would vet things like invoices that came in. They now have agents that are noticing things that humans never did and processing them dramatically faster and saving millions of dollars as a result. And so, those type of things are just helping every organization run more efficiently. But we're also seeing, organizations that don't traditionally have access to armies of AI specialists and software engineers use tools like Copilot Studio and Power Platform. Even relatively small community-based nonprofits implement agents that really help them expand out the type of service that they can offer their communities as well. So, it's early days for some of this stuff, but it's really cool to see what types of things people are building.
Okay, man, this one's a bit more of a broader question to close it out. The year is 2049. What's your biggest wish about, what the world looks like then?
Ooh, man. I think asking technology people to predict the future that far out right now is a dangerous thing. There's a former CEO of IBM who's on the record saying, I think there's a world market for 5 personal computers. And in the 70s, he was probably right. But in the grand scheme of things, there's a wider aperture. But look, I would say I am deeply optimistic about this technology shift. I get really excited by what happens when we can innovate at 10 times the pace, at 10 times the scale. How do we enable industries and job functions and roles that we can't even imagine doing today because we were able to free up a lot of the low-level repetitive types of tasks that everybody has to do today. That, I think, is the abundance thesis of AI. And I think there's a lot of interesting ways that we're already starting to see that happen. Even our own engineers and our team, because we're using AI, are spending less time chasing low-level support tickets and less time writing low-level tests and more time creating new things and iterating and experimenting and testing. And you're already starting to see that trend happen. It's enabling a whole bunch of new innovation at a pace that we just weren't able to accomplish before. And so, we've done so much with that in 18 months. I have no idea how much more we'll do with it in 18 years, but I'm darn excited to see where it shakes out.
Great. All right. Well, thank you for your time, Ryan. It was great talking to you. And excited to see the other updates at Build.
Likewise.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.